The clink of silverware against porcelain stopped, like someone had pulled the plug on the sound in the room. The air felt too still. My mother's voice broke first, soft and too calm, like she thought she could still redirect the conversation. "Sweetheart, we already talked about this. It's just easier if we all stay together." "No," I said again, quieter this time. "It's not easier. It's expected. And I'm done with that." Across the table, my sister shifted in her chair. I didn't look at her, but I could feel her smirk trying to slip through, that familiar scoff that always came before the spin. "You act like we chained you to a stroller last year," she said, rolling her eyes. "They're 6, not monsters." "They climbed the balcony railing," I said, still not looking up. "One of them threw my phone into the hotel fountain." My father cleared his throat. "We didn't know that." "No one asked," I said. A pause. Then my sister leaned in, voice suddenly thinner. "You're single. No kids. You had the space. Why wouldn't you help?" I finally looked at her. Because it wasn't help. It was expectation dressed as kindness. She blinked. And for the first time in a while, I didn't feel like the younger sibling. I felt separate. Like I'd stepped out of a role I didn't audition for. "You know, I only got to do one thing I wanted last year," I went on. "One. An hour at the gallery. And they trashed that too." Silence. Then, sharper, "So what, you're punishing the rest of us now?" "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself." I saw it then. That flicker in her eyes, not confusion, not anger, fear, control slipping. And somewhere beneath the tension in my spine, I felt the first real breath I'd taken in years. The hallway smelled like lemon polish and dust. I remember that more than I should, the way sunlight cut across the wooden floors, the faint whir of the ceiling fan, the vase. It had been perched on a narrow ledge in the entryway, just beneath my mother's favorite mirror, swirling blue glass with little gold flecks that caught the light. She said her grandmother brought it from Europe in a suitcase wrapped in wool. And one afternoon it was gone, shattered behind the cabinet like a dropped secret. My sister cried first, loudly, then pointed. He bumped it with his backpack. No one questioned it. Not once. My backpack was lying on the floor. That was enough. My father shook his head and sighed like I'd disappointed the entire ancestry. My mother's lips went tight and pale. I remember reaching out to explain, but the silence drowned me. Later that night, when I sat on the edge of my bed tracing the cracks in my wallpaper, she slipped into my room. "I'm sorry," she said almost sweetly. "I panicked, but thank you." Her arms wrapped around me, and I felt her heartbeat steady, calm, unbothered. Mine stuttered, unsure whether to forgive or fear. Back then, I thought it was what siblings did. You cover for each other. You protect the image. You let the cracks run behind the scenes, where no one looks. Years passed. That vase story faded like old paint. But the pattern didn't. The dog came next. It wasn't even our dog, a stray that started hanging around after school. One day it vanished, and the story my parents got was that I forgot to close the gate. I didn't even know the gate had been opened. 3 hours of searching. Flyers stapled to trees. My mother holding back tears like it was a funeral. And my sister? She stood beside me, offering sympathetic glances that somehow made me feel worse. I started to believe it was my fault, that maybe I really had forgotten. Maybe something was wrong with me, inattentive, unreliable, selfish. But then, years later, when we were both adults and barely speaking, she tossed it out during a phone call. "You always made things harder, you know. You could have told the truth about the vase, like I did with the dog." The words hit like a cold draft through a locked window. I stopped breathing for a second. "What?" She paused. "What? What did you just say?" Silence. Then she hung up. That's the thing about growing up. As the youngest, you don't notice when you're being conditioned. You laugh when they laugh. You take the blame because it keeps things calm. You hold your tongue because yours is the only voice that cracks under pressure. And when you're older, standing in a room full of people who claim to love you, you wonder why it feels like no one sees you at all. The triplets? They weren't just a handful of energetic kids. They were the next generation of a story I already knew by heart, the chaos, the noise, the mother who claimed exhaustion, and the brother who was told he had space in his life to help. It was the same story with new costumes. Only this time, I wasn't 10, and I wasn't backing down. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. You either keep playing the role, or walk off the stage entirely. The letter was heavier than it should have been. Not physically, it was one sheet, maybe two, but it felt like it weighed down the whole room the moment I opened it. The envelope had no warning signs, just white, clean, official. The kind of mail that makes your stomach tighten because it feels like something you forgot, something they know that you don't. My thumb slid under the flap. I unfolded the page slowly, already bracing for something dull. A census form, maybe. A generic government update. But no. Confirmation of your listed role as secondary guardian to minors, Jacob, Eli, and Noah. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Someone with a similar name, a mix-up in the system. But then I saw my full name, my date of birth, my home address. Every detail aligned. The couch creaked as I dropped into it, the paper shaking in my hand. I kept reading, hoping the words would reorganize themselves into something less insane. They didn't. Attached were details of financial claims, public assistance, childcare, housing vouchers, filed by someone who apparently lived with me, using my name, my information, and listed as the primary applicant? My sister. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until the room spun slightly. The air felt dense, like I couldn't pull it into my lungs fast enough. I called the number on the bottom of the page. The recording was robotic. Thank you for calling the Department of Social Services. Your expected wait time is 12 minutes. I listened to generic piano music and read the letter again. And again, my hands didn't stop trembling. I kept thinking of last summer, the hotel room with no locks, the boys jumping on beds, one of them throwing my phone into the hotel lobby fountain like it was a game, my sister laughing from across the room. I needed a break, she'd said. I got through to a live agent. Her voice was calm, practiced. She asked for my case number. I read it out. She paused after entering it, then said carefully, "And you're calling regarding your household listing?" My throat tightened. I didn't file any of this. She was quiet for a beat. You're listed as the secondary adult. The primary filer is... I know, my sister. Another pause. Then lower. Have you given consent for this arrangement? Number never. I live alone. I heard her breath shift, the slight rustle of paper. You may want to speak to a legal representative. This would be classified as identity misuse. I ended the call with a polite thank you I didn't mean. The paper sat in my lap like a confession. That evening I drove. No destination, just movement. My thoughts were louder than the car engine. How many times had she done this? Was this the only thing? Had she used my name before doctor's forms, school registrations, emergency contacts? What else didn't I know? I stopped at a red light and stared into the windshield like it could show me a way out. Then the internal voice, the one I usually buried, whispered something bitter. She knew you'd never fight her. That's why she did it. And it was true, wasn't it? All those years of taking the blame, all those times I went quiet, even when I knew she was lying. What's one more boundary when the others had already eroded? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I printed everything. Highlighted key lines, took photos, emailed myself backups. In the morning, I called my parents. I didn't tell them over the phone, just said I needed to talk. In person. My father grunted. My mother sounded nervous. Is everything okay? No, I said. But it will be. Their house hadn't changed. Still smelled like vanilla candles and the faint trace of furniture polish. I sat at the kitchen table. My mother poured tea like we were about to talk about weather. I handed her the letter. She didn't understand at first. Her lips moved slowly as she read. My father leaned over her shoulder, then pulled the paper from her hands halfway through. Is this a joke? Number. My mother's brow furrowed. She used your name? For a government application, financial aid, guardianship benefits. My father set the paper down with unusual care. You didn't sign anything? I shook my head. She faked it, probably copied my signature. There was a beat of disbelief. Then another. Finally, quietly. Why would she? I looked at my mother. Because she knew she could, and you've spent years letting her believe it. No one spoke. But something shifted in the air, the invisible thread that had always tied us in a hierarchy of roles. The golden child, the peacekeeper, the fallback plan, and now, the witness. That night, I got a text from my sister. Can we talk before you make this a bigger deal? I stared at it. The phrasing, the fear under it. Not regret, not apology. Fear of exposure. I didn't reply. Instead, I started drafting a formal report. Sometimes justice doesn't feel like a shout. It feels like finally saying, enough. The cookies smelled like cinnamon. She held the tray like it meant something. as if the scent might distract us from what was coming, as if warm sugar could patch over forged signatures and stolen identities. I didn't touch them. My sister set them on the dining table like a peace offering. She gave my mother a soft smile, like they were co-conspirators in a play, only one of them was still performing. Then she sat across from me, crossed her legs, waited. I took the folder from my bag, thick now, heavier than it looked, and laid it on the coffee table without a word. The sound of it hitting the wood made my mother flinch. I didn't open it. I wanted her to. I wanted her to be the one who saw her own lies printed in government font. I wanted her fingers to tremble as she turned the pages, realizing this wasn't going to disappear like the vase, or the dog, or that time in high school when I'd been grounded for something she confessed to 10 years later, half laughing. But she didn't move. So I opened it for her. First, the letter from the Department of Social Services. Then the form showing me listed as a household adult. The benefits summary, the payment receipts, my fake signature, scanned and embedded in official documents. I watched her eyes. Nothing. Then a blink, a tiny twitch of the jaw. Seriously? She said after a moment, flicking through the top page like it was a mailer for a car dealership. This is what we're doing now? Dragging me in front of everyone like I'm on trial? My mother shifted in her seat. Just explain. It's just paperwork, she said too fast. Everyone does stuff like this. You weren't using your name. My father's head turned, slowly. You what? She looked at him, the way she did when we were kids and she'd accidentally cursed in front of him, a mix of defiance and calculation. I needed help, she said. I was drowning. I mean, you both know how hard it's been. And she jabbed a finger toward me. He didn't mind watching them. He never said no. I didn't know you were pretending I was living with you, I said. I didn't know I was legally responsible for children I don't have. My mother's voice cracked. You used his social? The room went still. The radiator hummed in the corner. One of the cookies slid on the plate with a soft scrape as my sister shifted in her seat. I'm not your husband, I said. Not shouting, just done. I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your solution. You stole my identity. You stole my choice. She blinked, looked at the documents again. Then, for the first time, something cracked, not fully, but enough. My father stood. He walked out of the room without a word, just the creak of the floorboards down the hall. We all sat there, the echo of his footsteps replacing our breathing. A minute later, he came back carrying a black binder. He placed it in front of me without looking at her. Read it, he said. You deserve to know. I opened it. The binder was smooth and stiff, like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside was a typed document, legal language, notarized stamps, 2 witness signatures. A will. I scanned the lines, skipping the ceremonial phrases, until I found what mattered. My name, and only my name. The house, the savings, the property up north, all of it to me. Not her. She leaned forward, squinting. What is that? My father answered, still without looking at her. It's the will, updated last fall. She went still. Then voice rising, cracking. You didn't tell me? I didn't want the screaming, he said. And there it was. The scream. Raw, instant. Are you insane? He doesn't even want kids. He's selfish. He barely calls you. You forged his signature, my mother said. Her voice was quiet, but it landed like a thunderclap. My sister froze mid-rant. You forged your brother's name and submitted it to the government, my mother repeated. Do you even realize what that could do to him? Her eyes jumped from our mother to me, searching. Tu thought it was harmless. Just a form. It's not like I asked him for money. You asked the government using his name, I said. Her hands started to tremble. She tucked them under the table. I was desperate. You all have no idea. We do, my father cut in. We just don't lie about it. Silence. For the first time in years, she had no words. And for the first time in my life, I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let it grow, let it surround her, let her sit with the weight of a room that wasn't circling her anymore. She stood. I can't believe this. But she didn't storm out. She looked at me, eyes glossed over. They don't know what it's like, she whispered, like we were kids again, hiding behind the shed. They don't see how hard it is. You were supposed to help me. I did, I said. More than you'll ever admit. Then she was gone. Just like that. The door clicked shut behind her, and the cookies stayed untouched on the table, a tray full of false peace, slowly going stale. That night, my father poured 2 glasses of something dark and bitter. We sat on the back porch, the air thick with the scent of rain that hadn't come yet. "I should have stopped this years ago," he said. "You tried." "Not hard enough." I looked out at the yard, the same swing still hung from the tree. Same rusted wind chimes. She's not the only one who forgot I was a person. He didn't argue. Instead, he said, "You still want the house?" I didn't answer, because honestly, I didn't know. The next morning, I found a text from my sister. "Forget the will. You've already taken everything else." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words, but because, for once, she didn't deserve them. She went silent. Not just the kind of silence that fades in after an argument, but an intentional, structured quiet, like a wall built brick by brick. The group chat? Dead air. Her birthday passed, and I didn't get the usual guilt-laced reminder from Mom. Even the trip, already muted by tension, passed like two parallel timelines never meant to intersect. I stayed in a different hotel, different car, different schedule. When they went to the aquarium, I walked the coastline alone and watched the waves pull secrets back into the ocean. She tried to knock once a soft, uncertain tap on the door to my floor. I didn't move. The silence felt deserved. But silence has a sound when it breaks. 2 weeks after we got back, I opened the door to find a man standing on my front step. Late 40s, close-cropped hair, navy windbreaker with a stitched badge. The kind of presence that fills space before he even says a word. "Mr. Redacted?" he asked, flipping open a wallet badge. I nodded, heartbeat rising. "I'm following up on an investigation into benefits fraud," he said calmly. "Do you have a moment?" The world seemed to narrow the doorway, the hallway behind me, the sound of a clock ticking somewhere inside the house. I stepped aside. He didn't sit, just pulled a notepad from his jacket and glanced down. "You're currently listed as the secondary guardian on several state benefit forms. Did you authorize that status?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I was unsure, but because it was so surreal hearing it spoken aloud. My own name in a sentence I had never built. "No," I said. "I didn't authorize anything." He nodded slightly, already writing. "I've never lived in that household. I don't have children. I didn't sign anything." I reached for the folder on my side table, the one I kept now like a passport, and handed it over. Every letter, every screenshot, every timestamp message. He flipped through it slowly, methodically. "I believe you," he said finally. "You're not the first family member she listed without consent." That sentence sat in the air like fog, thick, heavy. There had been others. My stomach twisted. I didn't ask who. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. He thanked me, told me I might be contacted again, and then left as quietly as he arrived. The door clicked shut behind him, and I stood there for a long time, just listening to the hum of my fridge. It should have felt like relief, but it didn't. Because the betrayal had roots long, old ones that ran beneath the surface of my whole life. Ones I'd pretended weren't there, because it was easier to believe in a version of her that I could save. The fallout came in pieces. My parents stopped defending her. Not loudly, not with rage, but in their own way, that quiet shift in posture when her name came up, the way they stopped trying to explain her. "She's struggling." My mom said one evening, her voice low over the phone. "I know," I said. "So am I." She didn't respond. Even her husband, who had always seemed like a ghost on the edge of our family photos, started calling. Not to defend her, not even to mediate, just to say, I didn't know. I let the phone ring 3 times before picking up. I swear to you, I had no idea she did that. "Didn't you ever wonder why she stopped asking me for help and just assumed it?" "She told me you were fine with it, that you were close. She said you liked feeling useful." That stopped me. Useful. That word. It had been my whole life, hadn't it? The helper. The reliable one. The younger brother who didn't ask for much, so you could ask everything of him. She lied, I said quietly. He exhaled. "I know." Some nights, I still wondered if I should have answered the knock on the hotel door. If maybe I'd let the silence grow too thick, too final. But then I'd think about the letter from the government, the forged signature, the way her face had twisted in the kitchen when my father said the will wasn't hers. And I'd remember something I'd forgotten for years, a moment when I was maybe 13. She'd borrowed money from me, $20, which back then was everything. "Just for now," she said. "You're not going to make a big deal, are you?" And I hadn't. Because she said it like it was a test, and I'd wanted to pass. I passed a lot of tests I never signed up for. Maybe that was the real pattern, not just what she took, but what I kept giving, long after I had nothing left. That night, after the investigator left, I sat on my porch with a cup of cold tea and stared at the sky. The stars were faint, washed out by streetlights and city glow, but they were there. Distant, stubborn, and for the first time I didn't feel guilty for wanting distance too. Some things can only be seen clearly from far away. It arrived in the middle of a Tuesday. No knock, no tracking number, just a plain, unremarkable envelope slipped through the mail slot, landing with a soft pat on the hardwood. I almost didn't see it. Thought it might be a bill, or one of those pre-approved credit offers that somehow know your name but not your limits. But when I picked it up, I froze. No stamp, no return address, just my name, written in her handwriting. The slanted R, the exaggerated loop on the G. It pulled something out of me. I hadn't let surface in weeks a hollow tightness, somewhere between dread and mourning. I stood there for a long time before I opened it. The paper was folded twice, neatly. It smelled faintly like cinnamon and detergent, a scent I didn't realize I remembered until it was in my hands again. That used to be her default. Cookies in crisis. A smell to mask everything else. But there was nothing to mask here. Just ink, just words. I blamed you because you were always there. You were the only one who stayed when everything else crumbled. That made it easy. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to leave something behind that wasn't a mess. The script wavered in some spots. Either she'd cried while writing, or her hand had trembled. I sank onto the couch with the letter in one hand, the other resting on my knee like I didn't trust myself to move too much. She was gone. That's what her husband had said. Needed space. He sounded exhausted when he called, like he was reciting a script he didn't believe in. Said she left her phone, hadn't told anyone where, but the kids were safe. Said he was doing his best, and for once, it sounded like the truth. My mother had cried the next day, quietly, like she wanted to be seen but not comforted. My father, he didn't say a word, just stared at the floor like it had more to say than any of us. But this letter, this was the only thing she left for me. No accusations, no theatrics, no excuses really. Just a flicker of honesty, tucked into a silence that had finally grown teeth. There was no apology in the technical sense. No, "I'm sorry," scrawled in desperate cursive. And yet, in the space between those lines and what she chose not to say, I heard it. She'd built her rage around me because I was the only stable thing left in a life she never felt secure in. I was the constant, so I became the cause. I'd carried that weight so long, I almost believed it was mine to bear. I turned the page over, and that's when I saw it, pressed faintly into the back, like a seal the outline of a ring. Her wedding ring. Not drawn, not stamped. Pressed, like she'd written the letter with her hand curled against it, the pressure embedding the shape into the paper. She'd taken it off. I couldn't breathe for a second. Not out of sadness, not entirely. But because it hit me in that small, deliberate choice, she'd ended something. Or maybe many things. And I didn't know whether to feel grief or relief. The ring mark was the only punctuation she left behind. No signature, no date. Just that circle, pressed into the paper like a quiet surrender. I kept the letter. Not because I forgave her. Not because it made anything right. But because part of me needed proof that she had known, even for a second, what she'd done. That somewhere inside all that noise and blame and manipulation, she had one moment of stillness. And in it, she saw me. Not as the helper, not the brother, the fallback, the name on the forms, but as a person, and maybe that was all she had left to give. Maybe that was enough, or maybe not, I still don't know. But I folded the letter again, slower this time, and placed it in a drawer. Not in the trash. Not in a fire. Just somewhere quiet where things can be put down without being erased. The flame caught slowly at first, licking the edge of the paper like it wasn't sure. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the corner of the letter, a tremble in the joint I hadn't noticed until now. The handwriting stared back at me, stubborn and familiar, like she was still trying to have the last word. I could still hear her voice in my head, quiet and pleading. You were supposed to help me. But this wasn't help. It had never been. The fire crept inward. The ring-shaped indent blackened first, disappearing in a curl of smoke. Then the words followed, curling and hissing into ash. I didn't look away until it was gone, all of it. Part of me had wanted to show our parents. Proof that she'd cracked, that the cruelty wasn't just malice, but something more broken, something human. But then again, hadn't I spent years trying to make her feel more human to them while she chipped away at mine? I let the ash scatter across the sink. Later that week, a small envelope came in the mail. A drawing, shaky crayon lines, all primary colors and crooked hearts. 4 stick figures. One was taller, in blue. Mine, I assumed. Underneath it, a sentence in lopsided letters. You're still my favorite. I stared at that line for a long time, then smiled, but didn't cry. Forgiveness? I don't know, maybe it's not a grand gesture, maybe it's not even necessary. Maybe it's the quiet after a door that stays closed. Maybe it's the stillness that finally doesn't ache. Maybe it's standing alone and not feeling lonely. Maybe peace doesn't need permission. Maybe peace is just mine.